So wisdom that arises from the center. This month, we have, you'll see these kind of little things. It's Soul Matters, the path to finding our center. We have these available in our greeting area. And if you're a part of a small group like a Chalice Circle, we also email these out to facilitators. If you'd like to find out more about that, let me know. But what really caught me is I sit with two groups, one in the morning on Thursday, the first Thursday of the month, and we sit downstairs in the Children's Chapel and we talk about the topic of the month. And then in the evening, I have a completely different group, and we meet in person and online. And it's such a fascination when you look at a topic and you all have a different perspective. But what's really interesting is on the front of this, there is a dreidel. And so when you turn a dreidel, you think about how does it find its center? It's turning, and then it moves around a little bit, and you try really hard. You have to keep on turning it to make it stay upright. And when we think about finding our center as humans, we live in a finite world. And yet, oftentimes for our own security, we have to imagine that we're in this permanent and fixed space, that we have to say, we're not on a planet spinning in the middle of a vast universe, tilting on its axis, spinning around. I'm not a human in the midst of a vast ocean of people. And when we think about finding our center, there are so many things that are pulling us into their gravity wells, whether it is emails or other people's needs or our own fears or that feeling of not enoughness. And over the past 2 years for me, it's been trying to figure out new health situations, with rheumatoid arthritis. What does this mean? How do I get the right medication? And as many people enter into middle age, we have ailments and chronic conditions that we figure out, that we're not the same as we were when we were 10, maybe. And so life keeps changing. And how do we find that deep center, that sense of balance? And I think, first of all, it is that vulnerability to ourselves. When we pretend that everything is okay, even to ourselves, that's the hardest. You have to admit to yourself that maybe things are off balance. And that checking in with your body. Ruth Lovejoy did a yoga class recently, and it reminded me how much I love yoga. And it's ridiculous that, I have it on my calendar, and I haven't been going because it is such a, it's like anything. We're the least nice to ourselves. You call me and I'll show up in a minute. I'll be, oh yeah, I'm on your doorstep. I'm there for you. But I really need to tell that to myself, don't I? I need to say, hey, body, you feel like junk today. Maybe you should go stretch and drink lots of water, stand in the sunshine and rest. You are enough. You don't have to answer that email within 5 minutes. It's okay. And so we're the least kind to ourselves. And I think that is one of the biggest power of tuning into who we are, is to recognize where we are in the world. But I wanted to talk about a woman that you may or may not have heard of. And she was Hildegard of Bingen. She was born in 1098 as the 10th child to a landed family in Germany's Rhine Valley. And in those times, women did not have power. They were property, seen, not heard. And following the convention of that time for noble families, her birth represented a 1/10 tithe of the family's assets owed to the church. So at the age of 8, she was given to the church with the expectation of serving her life in solitude as an anchorite nun. And in the spirit of her tithing, she was effectively married to the church. Her dowry became church property, and she lived most of the first half of her life quietly serving out her role as a nun. Though her intellect was inquisitive, challenging nature were recognized early, and eventually she led her own monastery. And this is the poor health part that I was alluding to. She was often in poor health, suffering debilitating bouts that would leave her weak and frail. And this would inspire her search for wellness and bonds between the divine, the body, and the earth. She kept trying to figure out, how are we connected? How can I be well? And from her earliest childhood, she experienced visions and had transcendent experiences, but she kept them secret out of fear of, probably being burned as a witch and having unwanted attention. So at the age of 42, so all the people who think that it might be too late to do something, at the age of 42, she had this transcendent experience, which called her to break her silence, and she began writing. Despite the overwhelming risk, she felt called to reveal her visions, and they were often painful and exhausting. She wrote, "Everything that is in the heavens, on earth, and under the earth is penetrated with connectedness, penetrated with relatedness." She expressed these sentiments not only in her writing, but in music, medicine, and ecology, and theological works. She saw the state of humanity on earth as a microcosm for the universe, the health of the natural world as the health of the human soul, bound by this divine that was a part of everything. And I think what I found fascinating of Hildegard van Bingen is, in a world where there was a patriarchy view of God and Jesus, and that you had to follow the path of a book and talk to the priest, and she was like, nah. The universe is a cosmic egg, and she was radical. And she two of Hildegard's works, Physica and Causes of Cure, were the only two medical books known to have been written in Western civilization during the 12th century. She wrote extensively on cosmology, philosophy, and her concepts influenced modern thought, including Carl Jung's visionary work on subconscious. And so, I think back to how hard that must have been to be a woman standing up like that. And I think, how do you claim power for yourself? How do you claim that your enoughness when the world is telling you so much that you're wrong? And when we live in a world that holds up original sin, like that humans are originally sinful, I think it really permeates the water. It really does. That you must work harder, you must pay more, you must do more, be more to be enough. And this complete garbage, it is complete garbage, and so very toxic to our society, to our souls, to living healthy lives. And I think that is something that really drew me to Unitarian Universalism, was the idea of inherent worth and dignity, and that I didn't have to jump through this hoop to be saved or to be eligible for being in the club that was going to get to go to heaven. And that's where universalism, our universalist heritage of loving people with a big L, is so important. And Hildegard of Bingen, she basically suffered migraines, and when we look back at it, but for her, it was they were mystical experiences. She saw auras, and maybe they were mystic connections to God. I'm not gonna diminish what her truth was, but looking back, many people think that she really suffered bouts of migraines, but she saw things and felt things and created beauty in the world despite all of that. And that is what I find so very inspiring. I want to share a little bit of what she wrote. She said, God is the highest and fiery power, having kindled every spark of life. The fiery life of divine essence is a flame beyond the beauty of meadows. I gleam in the waters, I burn in the sun and the moon and the stars. This is in 1099. With every breeze as with invisible life that contains everything. I awaken everything to life. The air lives by turning green and by being in bloom. The waters flow as if they are alive. The sun lives with its light, and the moon is enkindled after its disappearance. Everything burns in the way of our breath. It constantly moves us like the wind-tossed flame of a fire. God is always in motion and constantly in action. And she goes on to talk about kind of like the green man and all of this just really amazing things. And I think sometimes, when we come out of traditions, we think that every Christian theologian is maybe like Martin Luther or Calvin or traditional, but there were women who were speaking up, who were living their theology in a completely different way. And we look at early Christians before the codification of Christianity in the deserts, the desert mothers and fathers. They believed in reincarnation. They believed in many different beliefs. There was such a diversity of belief. And yet when we try and, the Romans did a really good job of codifying things, making roads, burning down all the pagan effigies and saying, yep, it's all the same. But the early believers had a very different vision of Christianity. And so I think, as we think about being Unitarian Universalist, it's really powerful to not just throw everything out because of our own experiences. Sometimes we might have a woundedness with the church or because we were told that we were sinful or whatever it is. But I think there's power in that feeling that the world is full of, 1,000 million souls, however many souls, trying to make the world a better place. And I know in this community, working with Jonah and meeting people like Mark Helpsmeet, who's a Quaker, and he does wonderful work in the community. Working with Lynn Buskey, she goes to Trinity Lutheran, and all of these different people who are working together, and we have different beliefs, but we move forward. And there are times when we step back from leadership. There are times when we don't put money in the plate. There are times when we rest and let others lead. And we are in a place, hopefully, that when all boats rise, we rise together and become that beloved community that we want to bring about. And I think that's a completely different vision than what I saw in our House of Representatives last week. Wow, is that what we want to be? I don't want to be like that. I don't want to see people punching each other or taking 15 votes to create governance and democracy. Our nation is supposed to be founded on freedom and it's supposed to be about love and about so many grander things than this sort of infighting. And I think we often hesitate to talk about politics in congregations, but we absolutely should be talking about how we govern ourselves, how we let people have power and corrupt our society and let things happen that should not happen. So when I think about finding center, it's funny, you think about that maybe you should be sitting on a yoga mat, or maybe finding center is being quiet and contemplative. What I really liked in these materials that we had for our chalice circles was that maybe finding center is being maladjusted to the way things are. And that's what Martin Luther King says. We need to remember that achieving balance requires us to be purposely off balance and out of step with our culture, because our culture is so out of center. Do we want to accept that it's okay to treat people like our government treats people? Do we want to say that it's okay to have so many homeless on our streets, or that our healthcare system is broken? No, I don't. I don't know about you. And so to find center is not just to know yourself, but it's to know your world. And it's to know the water that you swim in. And for me, I try and find things where I feel like I can know my own voice, know my own power. How can I make a difference in the world? You know, some people volunteer, some people help out and greet at the door, or help down in hospitality, or go down to Sojourner House. And each of these motions, you know, pushes the world in a direction. So it's not simply a place of calm or peace that we're looking for, but it's a place of being pushed and launched. What you hear in this deep space within is not just the whisper of rest and breathe, but also take a breath and jump. It's an invitation not just for relaxation, and it's a still point, but a still point upon which we can pivot and to turn to something new. I have a memory of when I was young, and I don't know if you ever did camp, but at camp you do silly things like trust falls and climb over walls and do ropes courses. And middle school kids, I would never want to really fall and trust middle school kids, but we did, and luckily it worked out. But I remember, not saying that youth are bad, but that age you can be a prankster a little bit, and when you put your hands out for a trust fall, you stand like this, and you put your hands over, and you put your feet, and then everybody holds out their hands, and they're interconnected, and you literally just fall back. And I remember feeling so powerless and so afraid that I was going to just fall and hit my head. But every time they caught me. And I remember feeling so jubilant, that feeling of, and then I would look up at their faces and they would be looking down at me, and I felt so held. What if our society was like that? What if our congregation was like that? And I hope that sometimes it is, and hopefully often. And what if we did that for ourselves? What if we said, I need some chai latte today. I need to sleep in. So when you're thinking about finding your center, maybe in the end, instead of only asking, are you centered these days, we need to ask, where is your center sending you these days? Where is your center calling you to go? Thank you.